Okay. Good morning. We are on Mem Tes Amud Beis 49b1, short Amud. Amalei Ba'ila Rabba. Okay, so let's review. We finally got into the reasons as to how Eruv Chatzeros works. We had two opinions. One, the opinion was that it's because of Kinyan, that when everyone shares their piece of matzah, their roll of bread. Oh, hey, nice to see you. It's called. It just occurred to me. Okay, so when everyone shares their roll of bread, then what happens is that they acquire a place in the home. That's Mishum Kinyan. The other one says it's nothing to do with the acquisition. It's more about the fact that once they have bread in a person's home, then they're actually living there. They're living there, and it's Mishum Diorin. They're living there, right? So we said there are a couple of nafkaminas. There are a couple of practical differences between these different approaches. Okay, and now the Gemara asks a question according to both approaches. Amalei Abai l'Rabba l'didach kasha u'l'shmuel kasha. So according to both views, there's going to be a question whether it's because of residence, a joint residence, or it's because of a legal acquisition, a transaction. Either way, it's a question. Why? Because Hatani, we taught in the Brisa, Chamisha shegavu es Eruvin, 5 residents of a Chatzer who collected their Eruv, okay? And they all joined together, okay? So basically we have one courtyard, 5 people joined together, they put all their food together, great. Now they're all one unit. So all the people, right? So there's one Chatzer, there's one courtyard, we all live, there's one big courtyard, we all have our own homes, there's my home, there's your home, whatever, and we all put our food together in one place. And then, let's say we want to now join with the adjacent Chatzer. Right? So now we all are one Chatzer. This whole place is one courtyard, but now we want to join with that adjacent Chatzer. So what happens? Echad molech lekulan. One person goes and brings food, takes bread to the next courtyard to make themselves all join and become one. So Gemara asks, who knew, or Abai asked, who knew the Kakani? It's only one person who's making acquisition. Only one of us, let's say, so we all live in one courtyard, right? So we all put our stuff together in one place. Since I didn't pick on you, we all put...
Because I don't fight with people. That's why I didn't pick on me.
It's not like a personal thing. I need examples over here. Okay, so we all put it in Adina's house, right? And then, fine, it's all there. And then at one point, Max could go, welcome, and you could go to the next adjacent courtyard and give them bread. And now we're all joined together the next one. Now, only Max is the one giving bread and therefore making a kinyan, right? He's the only one making an acquisition, and who knew to Kadayar? And it's only his bread there, and therefore he's the only one who has a residence in that next courtyard, Visulo, and no one else. So how does this make any sense, right? Whether it's because of acquisition, only one person is making the acquisition, not all of us. And whether it's because of living there, only one person is living there. How does this work? So Amalei Abai says, no question. Lo de kasha v'lo Shmuel kasha is not a question to me, not a question to Shmuel. Shlichus de kulu ka avid. He is performing, Max is performing agency, he's just acting on our behalf. Whether it's in the form of acquisition, whether it's the form of... Even so, that's a good question. If this will work without knowledge, so we have a notion of zachin ladam shelo b'fanav. Presumably, this will work without a person knowing about it, because of this concept of zachin ladam shelo b'fanav. If there's a benefit, if there's an absolute benefit, right? Anytime that it's not absolute, then you can't do this. But assuming it's an absolute benefit, assuming we don't lose in any way by joining in that courtyard, then yes, he could do it because he could benefit for us without our knowledge. Okay, Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Chama Bar Guya, Amar Rav, halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. The halacha is like Rav Shimon, right? Who is Rav Shimon? Rav Shimon was how this whole discussion started with the 3 courtyards side by side, and we spoke about the fact that if the A and C combine with B, then they could go to B. They could bring things to B because of their joint, because of the fact that they're sharing. There was a debate about Rav Shimon's view. Does he allow B to bring things to A to C? That is not being resolved over here, but certainly A and C, if they share an Eruv, if they both make Eruvin with B, they're allowed to combine. We saw the Rabbanan disagree. The Rabbanan say everyone's usher with one another in that case, but Rav Shimon holds that at least A and C could, if they made an Eruv with B, they're allowed to bring things into B. Okay? End of that discussion. New Mishnah about a case where a person is on his way, he's traveling to a city, and he's not close enough to the city, but there is a landmark between him and the next city. Okay, so what you have is as follows: you have a person who's walking, and they are over here. Person, okay, their home is over here. Okay, and there's 2,000 amos. Okay, till here, 2,000, right? And then there's 2,000 amos to their house. Okay, and there's a landmark, there's a tree over here. Okay, and so the person is not next to the tree. The person is within 2,000 amos of the tree, and they're trying to figure out what to do. Okay, so let's see. So Misha Habalo b'derech v'chashkalo. Right, they're traveling on Friday. It's becoming dark, and they're not going to be able to reach the tree. Vayamakir ilon gadar, and he knew that there was a tree or a fence. Okay, and just I know this at this point it doesn't seem so relevant, but this tree, the whole expanse of the tree, is 8 amos. Okay, 8 amos. Okay. Kids say I have issues making 8s. Okay, bigger issues in life, but I can't make 8s very well. Okay, so here we go. Here is your 8. Could you see that? That's an 8. Fantastic. Okay, so there it's 8 amos wide. Okay, so the Amar Shvi Sasi Tachtim, the person says, I want my residence to be beneath that tree. Lomar Klum, he said nothing. Okay, now the tree is large. Okay, and he didn't give a very specific space under that tree. He just said under that tree. But the tree, as we just pointed out, is 8 amos wide. It's an undefined space. How large is a person's residence if they don't define the residence? Like 4 amos. 4 amos is a typical space of a person. Over here, they said, my residence is over there. But there is too big. It's 8 amos. Okay, so we're going to come back and explain this a little bit more. Okay, Lomar Klum, he didn't say anything. We'll have to define what those words are. He did not say anything. Does that mean literally like nothing, like it did nothing, or it didn't do what he wanted to do? Okay, we'll come back to that point in the Gemara. Shvisasi bi karo. But let's say he gave a very specific place. He said, I want to rest right over here. X marks the spot. I want to be at the trunk. Okay, then, okay, mikaro. So mahalich makam ragal vikaro alpai mama. He could go from his feet till the trunk 2,000 amos, okay, and then umikarma beso pai mama, and then since he now has an eruv, so to speak, at the trunk, he could go from the trunk to his house another 2,000 amos. Yeah, makes sense.
What does he have at the tree?
He has a conceptual resting space. In other words, so far we've had.
So not eruv.
It's Erev Tchumen, but it's the most novel form of Erev Tchumen. When we start off by talking about a case of Erev Tchumen, you need food. Then we start talking about a person making Erev Tchumen just by their feet, which we'll talk about again in our Mishnah. Now we're talking about Erev Tchumen with my mind almost, right? In other words, the classic case of Erev Tchumen is I put down food in a place that I want. I go before Shabbos. If you want to travel outside the border of Baltimore on Shabbos, you go with some food, you put it down within 2,000 amos, and you've acquired that as your place. You're allowed to travel on Shabbos up to that place, and another 2,000 amos beyond it. That's the classic case of Erev Tchumen, which is the case you want to do if you ever want to make Erev Tchumen. Then we spoke about a case where a person's standing in a space, or they could say, I'm going to make my Erev, they move outside, they walk outside the city within 2,000 amos, they say, I'm making my Erev Tchumen just by being here. And we'll see in our Mishnah itself is going to discuss it again. We've discussed it a few times. This case, the most novel, he's not there, and his food's not there. But I know of a particular space, so I say, I want that to be my home. I want that to be my residence on Shabbos. And that works. We'll see how far-reaching. Can you do it on a regular Shabbos? We'll see. But the point is it's the same concept. It's just that you're not there, your food's not there, but you know about it, and you're saying, I want that to be my residence, and that in this particular case, that does work in some particular cases. Okay, we'll come back to how far-reaching this allowance is. Yeah, you with me? Yeah, it's fine. So. What comes out is that in this case, he's going to end up being able to walk 4,000 amos, right? Which is your classic case of a tchum, right? The tree trunk now becomes the place of his home, his residence. He's able to travel from where he is to the tree, which is 2,000 amos. From the tree to his house, which is 2,000 amos. Fantastic. Okay. Imeno makir. Let's say a person does not know of a landmark. Regular case, guy's walking, and he doesn't know of a particular place, right? In other words, it's not like he sees it. It's just like, if a person is knowledgeable, he says, wait, I know I'm 2,000 amos from the tree. Great. That tree is going to be my landmark. That's going to be my home. But let's say he doesn't know of a particular landmark. Oshina baki balacha. He simply doesn't, he never came to Eruvin Amud Yomi. He doesn't know halacha. V'amar shvisasi bimkomi. And he says, let my Shabbos residence be at my present location. 49b2. Zachalo mikomo alpayim amalacha ruach. Then he acquires 2,000 amos in every direction. Obvious, in other words, let's say he doesn't know any landmark, so he can't do anything, or he doesn't know halacha, so he just says, okay, so let this place be my residence. So he gets 2,000 amos, and he can't make it home. He'll be able to see his home because he's going to be close, but he's not going to be close enough, right?
So we're not even worried with how far he is from anywhere else where he came from. It doesn't matter.
Right.
This is just, it happens in his awareness that I'm going to run out of time.
And he wants to get home. His main thing is he wants to get home. Exactly.
So what does he accomplish by being able to go 2,000 amos from where he is? He's still not going
nothing.
to get home.
It's basically, in this last case, it's basically saying, it's another way of saying, like,
you're stuck.
You're stuck.
But if that tree is more than 2,000 amos from where he started, he can't
do it. Can't do it. He needs a particular location to be the place of residence, right? So meaning there is a limitation on this. It's not like he just says within 2,000, it has to be a particular location within 2,000 amos, and you can be within 2,000 amos of the next place. Exactly.
So if you're in the middle, if your home is in a remote-ish location, you should make sure there's a tree within 2,000 amos of your home.
Yeah, you should make sure you're home before Shabbos. Yeah, exactly. That too. Okay, agulos. Now, we haven't yet discussed how to measure the 2,000 amos. So, Divrei Chanina ben Antignos, the first opinion, Chanina says the 2,000 amos are measured in a circle, okay, in a circle around the space. And they are square, like a square board. Okay, bottom line is they're square. Okay, Kadeshiu Niskar Lazavios, he ends up gaining a little bit, right? If you make it square, obviously, right? If you make a circle of 2,000 amos, you make a square actually saves you, it gives you an additional the corners. So again, it's a rabbinic law, this whole notion of schum, and they're going to be a little bit more lenient of how to measure it. A square, right? You can see the picture over here, right? A circle obviously is a little bit smaller than the amount of space that a square gives you. Okay, then the Mishnah concludes, Vizohi Sha'amru. Okay, so this is what Chacham said, Ha'ani Ma'are Baraglav. This is like an extension of the case that we spoke about, we quoted earlier, but now we're sticking in the Mishnah, that a poor person can make an eruv with his feet. Okay, that what this means that since he has no food, therefore you're allowed to make an eruv with your feet. Now over here again, it's an extension. It's not really his feet. It's like his mind. It's like I want to make an eruv in that place, which I'm not even standing there right now, but it's similar to that. In other words, in as much as I can make an eruv with my feet, like saying, "Oh, I'm here. This is my residence," I could say, "Oh, I know of that place. That's going to be my eruv," even though I don't have any food to put over there. Okay, Amra Meir, anu ein lanu ela ani. This is only true for a true poor person. Okay, that this is not true for everyone. It's not true for a person who has the means, the person who has extra food around. They are not allowed to do this. This whole leniency only applies to someone who really has no food. Rabbi Yehuda Omer echad ani v'echad asher. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. We saw this quoted earlier. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. It says no, whether it's a poor person who has no food or a person who has food. Lo amrum arvim bepas. The whole notion of making an eruv with bread, ela asher, was only to make things easier for the person who has food. Shlo yetzev arbaraglo, he doesn't have to go out and do so with his feet. But in truth, right, he could go before Shabbos and place food there. It's a leniency. But in truth, doing it with your feet is actually should be allowed by all, right? So arguing, what's the ideal? Is it the ideal that you should do food, and therefore doing it with your feet is only a leniency for someone who doesn't have food? Or is it really the real thing is to do with your feet? Because I'm saying this is my residence, right? Which would make sense, like I'm here, right? And the reason we allowed food was a leniency, so you don't have to schlep, as Shabbos begins, you have to start Shabbos like 2,000 amos away, right? That's what they're arguing about, okay? Fine. We'll discuss the machlokes a little bit more later on. Okay. So now the Mishnah told us that in a situation where a person said, "I want to be under the tree," but doesn't define where under the tree, then the Mishnah said, "Lo amar klum." He didn't say anything. So I'm going to ask, "My lo amar klum." What does it mean when he says nothing? So we'll see two opinions. Amar Rav, lo amar klum kol ikr. Rav said that he literally, if he says my residence should be under the tree, and he didn't define where under the tree, it wasn't the trunk, then nothing. He cannot move. He gets 4 amos from here, right? If he says, my residence should be under the tree, but doesn't define the X, just says in general, under the tree, then he gets nothing. He can only stand over here 4 amos, okay? Shmuel Amar, no. Lo Amar Klum Leveso, it means he can't go all the way to his house. He's allowed to go under the tree.
He still has 2,000 amos.
That's only if he acquired a space, right? In other words, remember we had cases where a person, let's say, for whatever reason, goes outside of his area. If he loses the space. Over here, if I say that should be my space, but I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know actually give myself, then I lost it. So Shmuel says no. What it means, I'm allowed to go up to the tree, right? You can't go all the way to his house. He's allowed to go beneath the tree. Okay, why? V'nasa tachtav shal ilan chamar gamal. And under the tree becomes like the donkey driver is also a camel driver. Remember that expression? That basically you're kind of stuck in both ways. Why? So balim dod min atzafon, modun lim adam. If he wants to measure from the north, then we measure from the south. But limdod min adarom, modun lim atzaf. If he wants to measure from the south, then we measure from the north. What that means is as follows: since he didn't define where under this tree his next 2,000 where under the tree he's residing. So basically, we have to be concerned that maybe he wanted to reside over here, let's say, and therefore, when you measure the 2,000 amos, it's going to go just missed my house, right? And if he wants to measure going like in this direction, we have to, like each place we have to measure from the furthest place. Like we don't know where to measure the next 2,000 amos from. Since he didn't define the trunk, which would have been defined, and then we'd say, 2,000 amos to the trunk, and then 2,000 amos from there. But since he said the tree, we have to measure like every possible place under the tree. And so we can never, we always have to be stringent. We always have to be careful. He's going to basically lose, so he has like, 1,996 amos. He doesn't have 2,000 amos, right? Because he loses 4 amos, because we always have to measure from the furthest place, because we're never sure exactly where under the tree he wanted his measurement to start. And that's why in this case where it was exact. 2,000 amos, since it wasn't a defined place in the tree, he's going to be stuck, and he's not going to be able to make it to his house. Yeah?
I forget, we got into some of these details with Mr. Jones, I forget.
How can you forget?
I don't come in person.
There we go. Okay.
What's the status of the tree independent of the person? The tree is a what? It's not a Rosh Hashanah.
It's not a Rosh Hashanah. Depends on the type of tree. It depends on the type of tree. Let's assume it's a nothing. Let's assume it's just a Rosh Hashanah. But we could assume it's a Rosh Hashanah. Depends where on the tree is. But if he's under the tree, maybe why? You're saying if it's Rosh Hashanah, then he gets the whole space?
Right, it could be by definition the tree is its own place, and as long as you can get there, you should be fine.
Yes and no. In other words,
once you're there,
right? So we'd have to right. It's actually Eruvin discussion. Remember, we had machlokas from Gamliel and the Chachamim about if it's an enclosed space, do we define the whole space as one? So a tree would not be an enclosed unless you're talking like a willow tree, which would have like walls. Then otherwise, it wouldn't be an enclosed space. Maybe it would lose its full-fledged status of Rosh Hashanah. Possibly depends on the structure, but unless it has walls around it, that opinion would not exist. Yeah, good call though. Eruvin though. Okay, fine. Amar Rava. Rava says, okay, let's just go a little further. My time de Rav. Okay, so Shmuel's explanation is pretty straightforward, right? We understand why Shmuel's saying that he can't go all the way because we don't know where under the tree he wants to, he wants his Eruv to start, right? That we understand, right? Shmuel, the last opinion that we just explained, who says that you just can't go all the way over here because we don't know where under the tree you are, that we understand. But Rav said he doesn't get anything. Why doesn't he get anything? Why can't he go to the tree? Right, he said, I want to be under the tree. So let him, like Shmuel's explanation is very straightforward. So what's the reason behind Rav? Right? So 50A1, Nun Amud Aleph, Amar Rabba, my time at Rav. What's the reason behind Rav? Mishum Tlo Messiah Asrei. Since he didn't define which area, okay? Since he didn't define which area, so it basically has no legal landing space, right? In other words, you have to really give a space, and since 4 8 amos is nothing halachically, so there's no place to be. Okay, v'ikeda amri, there are those who say, Amar Rabba, the Rav says it's slightly different. My time to Rav, mishum niksaver kol she'eno bezecher zeh, afilu vas achas eno. If something cannot take effect consecutively, then it cannot even take effect simultaneously. What does that mean? That sounds very confusing. What that means is as follows. Let's say the person, so 8 amos. What is 8 amos? 8 amos means there's 2 possible residence spaces under this tree. Let's say the person would have said, my residence is the south 4 amos and the north 4 amos, right? Would that work? It would not work because you could only have one residence. So when I say under the tree, what I'm effectively saying is under the south part of the tree and under the north part of the tree. Since I can't say those 2 statements one after another, I also can't say them together. When I say under the tree, I'm saying both at the same time, and therefore nothing is effective. The whole thing is undone. Since what I'm ultimately saying is 2 statements which are nonsensical, they can't take effect. If I would say them one after another, under the tree means under these 4 amos and under these 4 amos, which means nothing. I can't have 2 residencies. Therefore, I say under the tree, which means under all of it, it doesn't do anything. And that's why he has nothing, even not under the tree. My benai, what's the difference between these 2 approaches? Either because the area is not defined, or when he says, because he's saying under the tree, which is 8 amos, and therefore it's 2 things consecutively, also don't take effect simultaneously. So you can Amar liknuli arba amos migu shmona. Let's say the person says, I want to acquire residence of 4 amos of the 8 amos. Doesn't define which ones, but he says, I want to acquire 4 amos of the 8 amos. According to the first version of what Rav said, according to the first version of what Rabbah said in the name of Rav, explanation of Rav, he still didn't define which 4 amos. And therefore, if the issue is you need to define your space, and I say 4 of the 8 amos, well, we still don't know which ones, and therefore it still doesn't work. But according to the second version, which said that any situation where you can't say where it doesn't work consecutively, it doesn't work simultaneously, then here, Hai Ka'arba Amos Dami. This does work. Dahacha Arba Amos Kamar. I said 4 amos of the 8. Now, even though I don't know exactly which ones, but that statement is a valid legal statement because all I'm saying is 4. In other words, the reason that it didn't work in the case of our Mishnah is because I said 4 amos. It's as if I said 4 amos and another 4 amos. Well, you could only pick 1 4 amos. But if I say 4 of the 8 amos, so according to the version, it says it has to be clear. It's not clear, it doesn't work. But according to the version, it says that it has to be halachically valid one after another. Here it is, because all I'm saying is it's 4 of the 8 amos. So I grant I don't know which one, but 4 amos is a valid space to live. And therefore, it would be a valid statement. And therefore, according to Rav, had I said, according to the second version of Rav, had the person said, not under the tree, but under 4 amos of the tree, according to the second version of Rav, that would actually work because you'd be under the tree. As long as you got under the tree, you'd be good. Then you'd be able to, you'd have the next 2,000 amos, or at least you'd have like Shmuel's version. You'd have this case where you'd be stuck, but you'd still be able to go more than 4 amos. So it would be a valid statement because ultimately what you're saying is that I want to be under the tree. Where under the tree? Okay, we're still not sure, but you would certainly have more than 4 amos because you're saying something which is valid. 4 of those 8 amos.
We should assume that you're going to say the 4 that are closest if we want to be...
Maybe, but we don't have to do that. Fine.
But we should...
Yeah, but that'd be a question according to Shmuel as well. Why Shmuel is saying you're a chamar gamal?
Right. We should...
Okay, fine. Good question. Why we don't find, but it'd be the same. It'd be the same point. The point is that, right? Again, according to Rav said that when the Mishnah said lo amar klum, it didn't say anything. That you only have 4 amos. There's 2 versions why. One is because it was undefined, right? And therefore, as long as it's undefined, it's undefined. The other is because halachically you can't acquire 2 4 amos spaces one after another. But if you say 4 of the 8 amos, then it would be able to work. Fine. I'll stop over here. Have a great day.